So excited to finally share with you guys our survey results. I know many of you have been asking what it looked like, and just it's really cool to see all the changes and the honesty that our grantee partners have given us. And also, like, we changed the approach of how we ask questions for them. Okay, so before I get started with the presentation, I'm gonna talk about like why we're giving out a survey when there's tons of professionals like CEP that does their own national surveys, right? I also want to talk about the changes I've made in our surveys from like the beginning, like pre you guys to now. Also talk about who were the ones that responded to the surveys. And most importantly, we want to know about their feedback, like in terms of how we've communicated with them. Also, we made a lot of changes in the application. I'll let you know more about that. And one of the new things that we've added in the grantee survey is specifically like policies, any of the changes in policies made and how it has affected them specifically in their organization and capacity building, as well as their communities. There's tons of them, but for time, I'm going to talk mostly about the immigration policy, the SNAP Medicaid, the DEI, and the education. The other ones I'll skip and you can read that on your own. And if you have any questions, we can go further. And then we're going to talk about ask our grantee partners, what other support do you need from us? And they've written some things. So I kind of collected some themes that they've asked. And also we asked about like what type of capacity building workshops are they interested in. Okay. So why are we collecting this? My infamous bit of why. So last year I went to the CEP conference with Scott. I think it was like November, right, Scott? And they were presenting their national findings about like what is happening with nonprofits and like basically like philanthropy. And their results showed that, you know, they're working in a high pressure environment, right, because of all the political shifts. And the results are very similar to ours that we've collected. So I was like, wait, we do this too. Our grantee partners, similarly, like the reporting, they talked about that they have food insecurity, financial instability, and a lot of stress in terms of like leaders are facing stress. So I thought that was really interesting. But at the same time, then why are we making our own survey if the survey results are very similar? One, it's just important because it confirms national findings, but at the same time, we don't want to assume that all national findings are going to be very similar to our grantee partners because they might be a little different, right? We don't know. And the other thing is what's different about our surveys, we ask how we did. How are we serving them, right? These national surveys don't ask that. And it keeps us accountable how we are supporting them. And it also gives us direct insight of other than asking them how we're doing, but also telling them how can we support you outside of just money. So that's why we're doing this survey. And then specifically, these are some sections that we're collecting, right? The first one is the changes that we made in the application and if it's burdensome, right? Like, is it anything that we changed did they provide more stress on them or is it easier? We wanted to know about program officer engagement, right? You guys are now communicating with them a lot more. You guys are doing a lot more site visits. So we're just curious, okay, is all this constant site visits stressing them out? Are they enjoying it? How's the communication look like? Specifically on grants, right? Now we're doing final grants and also step down. So are we communicating with them clearly about it? And then obviously the policies are changing, right? Are we asking them how they're doing during that time? Are we supporting them during this time as well? And how are they doing with staff and the communities? And realistically, we're also taught what's different about our surveys versus CEPs is like, we just want to make sure that we're relational with them and not just giving out money, right? Like, are we like supporting them more than just writing a check? And lastly, obviously, we want to know about what support do they need in terms of capacity building needs, right? Those are some of the most important things that we're asking. So another thing I wanted to talk about is how I shifted the survey. Before, it was just more of like operational, like, hey, did you like the system? Was fun and easy. It was very simple questions. It wasn't was it functional? Did it work? Were we responsive when you had simple questions, right? It was just very plain. But I transitioned it from last year more, hey, how are you doing, right? Like we wanted to be more relational. I changed it to like organizational well-being, right? How are they experiencing the political climate? What are they facing with their communities and other pressures, right? And how are we responsive? So that's a really good shift of how did the system work? How is our system to now? What's going on in your community and how are we supporting you? because clearly our system, they like our system. It's very easygoing, we're responsive. So why am I always constantly asking them questions that we know the answers to? So we switched it to more, how are they doing? And these are kind of the main things that we added, right? The policy specific questions. And that's me, painting what we are now. So
That her? Is that you?
Yeah,
that's me. That's me. That's me. Be like, hey. So, so we on this survey we're asking policy specific questions, and we're asking about the impact of how those policies are affecting them, so then we can be better informed, and specifically how it's affecting their organization and the communities that they're serving. And then we also, because we made tons of changes in our application and processing, we really just wanted to make sure that we removed the 6-month reporting. We added the organizational self-help, like the organizational health assessment, and obviously more engagement from program officers. So we just wanted to say, hey, did we add more stress on you, or what's going on? So okay, so let's get started. Any questions? I know I'm like, all good. Okay. So
I just have a question.
I had a feeling. I felt it, Scott.
Have we got any feedback that says that we're failing anywhere? Well, I don't want to call it negative, but usually when grantees will have this feeling that, I gotta give good answers. Yeah. And I would just wonder if there's any space where you're getting real constructive feedback that we can take away.
Well, let's see the answers.
Yeah.
Ask those questions.
It's a good question, Scott. I also just, so for a survey, we had 41 respondents, which shout out to all of you and program officers who you guys were personally reaching out to your grantee partners to submit. In previous years, I would have 12 submissions, and we've tripled it to 41. So thank you for that. And typically those who submitted it are from the education, opportunity, health and immigration, human rights, which makes sense because that typically that's how our portfolio looks like, right? When those are our top grantee partners. In terms of the size, over half of them were mid-sized grantees who submitted this. And then there was an equal representation of those who are the low budget scale, and then the larger ones. So it's kind of representative of how our data. But I would love to encourage more of our smaller orgs just to get the real-time feedback as well, versus the bigger ones who have a bigger staff, right, who can do the work. Okay, so how did we do? Great question, Scott. Okay. So these are some of the changes I want to talk about, how did we do in terms of the application. So as a reminder, we've updated the 6-month report. We completely removed that. Before, it was them writing a whole essay of what changes have been made during the 6-month report. We removed that, and the idea was to have them write something short. And because program officers were visiting them more often, the idea was program officers were now asking the questions for them instead of grantee partners typing it. What they said, it completely helped reduce time and effort. They didn't have to type it. They didn't have to reach out to different departments to get the answer. I only asked them how much of the percentage of grants have they spent from the previous year if it was applicable to them. Because of that, they were able to communicate better with program officers about any changes, right, that was happening to them. So that's where the transactional and relational transition helps. In terms of the health self-assessment, I was a little nervous when we added it because I thought they were going to panic asking them all these questions to to assess themselves. But they actually liked it. It helped them reflect a lot about their strengths and their growth. They said that allowed program officers to better understand where they're coming from, because typically applications don't ask those questions. It's just asked about them applying for a program, but not necessarily the health of the organization. And because of that, program officers are able to connect with them. And it didn't create any burden. That's what they said. So maybe they're saying it just to make us feel better. And then curious about communication with program officers. They said that program officers really respect their time. Also, program officers are very flexible with availability. So they also appreciate is that the fact that program officers are doing site visits during programmatic days, right? To show the work instead of just a one-on-one. And they really appreciate that we're able to work with their schedule, not vice versa. And they really like when officers allow them to have a really honest dialogue with them. So kudos to you guys. And in terms of grant cycle and communication, that's including me as the grants manager. They mentioned that we were really good with communication. We are very responsive when they have any questions. And a really great thing I wanted to highlight. So I don't remember if you guys remember last year when we talked about how well we communicated with them in terms of step down and final grants. Like a lot of them did say that they were a little who were assigned that they were a little bit confused about it, or they weren't clear about why they received a final grant or a step down. And this year, those who reported that they were final and or step down, they said that the staff fully explained the reasoning. So that's a good side. So it's negative. Last year, they said that they were a little confused about it, but it sounds like program officers are doing a better way of explaining why they received the final grant or why they're a step down. And I think that's great because now that we're in our transitioning years, right, of like a sunsetting, we have to be mindful of constantly communicating with them what it looks like once we have everything final with the communication. How we talked about like federal policies, right? Like this is something really important. It was really great to like hear their voices about how all these federal policies have affected them. The first one I really want to talk about is immigration and ICE enforcement. And just to give you some context of this picture on the right side of the leaf, this is behind that's a school building. ICE agents just picked up someone around that area in front of students. So imagine that. So we asked about how ICE enforcement and activity has affected like their organization community impact. So these are the themes that I saw. So they said definitely staff capacity. They have been burnt out. The increased stress is affecting their staff balance being and effectiveness, especially leaders, because the leaders are so stressed. They are not being great leaders to their staff, and the staff are also stressed because of that. And in terms of just high needs, and then there's high service demand, right? There's a lot of needs for services, but there's limited people or limited funding to provide those services. And then what was really interesting about this that they mentioned is that they had to figure out a safety planning need. For example, there's one grantee partner, HIPAP, who they shared that like they're hearing different things where if a parent is dropping their student or their child off at a after school program, that's when ICE agents take advantage and pick up the parents during that time. So they have to figure out a planning system so then students can be safely like can go to these after school programs, and oftentimes they don't have those skill sets to do. That's like outside of their job description. And then because of that, there's a lot of program cancellations and reduced participation, and be mindful that a lot of funding, they rely on number of participants. So if their number of participants have decreased, it's going to affect the funding because some funding aren't flexible enough for that. We also asked about like, how is it affecting your community? What they've seen is definitely a lot of emotional strain, a lot of fear, stress, and anxiety that's affecting the families that they're serving. And then there's the loss of income. A lot of those who are unfortunately being detained are fathers and they're the breadwinners, right? So then that's an issue in itself, and it's just the mother and the children who need financial support. And another one is definitely access and engagement. Not a lot of people are engaging in the programs anymore that they really need. And it's affecting, it's affecting their support. But they did notice a definite increase of the need Know Your Rights program and legal information. So grantee partners have been finding ways to provide those services without the community being there in person, like online or anything of that matter. So that's definitely one of the things that I've heard from the survey. In terms of SNAP and Medicaid, what I've noticed is that like, because it's like they're constantly changing the policies, right? First of all, they said no SNAP, and then 2 days later, yes, or something. It's constant changes. So what's been happening is it's putting a lot of stress on staff who are the ones that's help clients reapply. And I feel that pain because when I was a social worker and I had to do these things, imagine there's constant changes. You tell the client one thing and then 2 hours later, they're not eligible anymore because some random policy change. So that's been really, it's really put a lot of stress on staff for that. And there's a lot more need for emergency assistance demand. So a lot of like food support, housing, right? They need a lot of housing, They need some short-term financial aid. So it's a lot of things that our grantee partners are trying to face in this, in addition to immigration, ICE enforcement, and also this. And also direct service, there's higher caseloads and there's like not a lot of staffing. And then because of that, there's burnout. And then sometimes staff are just quitting because of the amount of like stress that they're facing. And then similarly with community impact, what they're seeing in terms of SNAP and Medicaid changes, there's obviously less reliable access to for them to have food, right? And any basic nutrition. And then also with coverage, right? Health coverage, they lost insurance or interrupted coverage, which means they can't afford their medicines, whether it's for those who have diabetes and they need insulin. That's an issue in itself. And then there's going to be probably a high demand in like emergency services. And same thing with household instability. What's happening is that because they lost support on SNAP and they have to actually buy food, but then if they buy food, they can't afford it. And that's already putting a lot of stress on community. And because of that, it's putting stress on nonprofits because nonprofits have or grantee partners have their own like emergency services, so like financial emergency services, but they're like they don't have enough to support every single person, right? For like financial stability. So they're going through a lot. Yeah. So, and this was really interesting, the DEI, right? A lot has happened in terms of like changes in DEI policies. So organizational impact, right? It's forcing our grantee partners, unfortunately, even us, right, to like do strategic shifts, and they have to change their program language. And at the same time they're doing this, they're supporting families that need like support with SNAP benefits or ICE immigration at the same time doing this. So it's a lot. So what's happening is now they have to shift the language, they have to change the strategy, and they're stressed out because they just submitted a funding to not a funder about their just strategy reports and everything. But guess what? They have to change it again, and they have to report to the funder saying, "Hey, FYI, I just changed it because of X reason." So a lot. Loss of funding because of that. They said they're losing funding because the funding was supporting equity focused group, and they lost it. And now they're stuck of trying to figure out other ways to keep it or reword it in a way. And then there is some increased demand in programs. You know, a lot of people are interested in equity focused programs, and then the staff are just completely stressed out trying to ensure that they're changing the wording to make sure these programs didn't disappear. And when we asked about community impact, I wanted to talk to you about more of like their own words. So because of time, I'm just going to read off some quotes. So it says here specifically, like one grant was awarded but never honored. Another was eliminated before submission. Federal funding paused, canceled, and set to expire. This is what our grantee partners are saying. Another one is diverse education pipelines are becoming a thing of the past. And then small businesses are impacted by lack of access to capital. Loss of jobs for Black women. And then tribal communities have lost employment opportunities. Another thing is immigrant and undocumented clients are foregoing employment due to fear of deportation. And these are all related to DEI federal changes. And then someone said, we have to pause staff-led affinity groups due to the new funding requirements. So that's a lot. That's a lot what they're going through. And I just wanted to highlight the quotes that they said to not erase their own words. And then the education, right? There's a lot of policy changes related to education. So because of that, as you could really see the theme that's happening. Because of that, they're a lot more stress, the staff, because now they have to find additional funding. They have to probably find additional staff or limited staff, or they have to find work in order to ensure that any of the educational programs still exists, like scholarships, etc. And they constantly have to strategize different things. They have to adjust the program focus or even delivery methods because the federal funding is either being deleted or removed, or they're changing like different methods. Like, oh, if you want to be eligible, you have to do X, Y, and Z. So they're constantly trying to keep up with the eligibility, but it's always changing. And then of course, like a lot of the funding is related to partnerships with other organizations. And because the funding is being lost or removed, they're losing partnerships with other organizations that can help with the programs, right? And that's putting a lot of stress on staff because now they're putting all that work there. And of course, with community impact, it's really affecting low income students, right? Because these programs help them to achieve like during high school or college or beyond. And because of that, there's no access to education programs. And again, it's affecting low income students. And because of that, they're not receiving the services. They're dropping out of school, or they're like doing other things. So it's affecting. That's how it's affecting the community. And really interesting in my conference right now, I'm talking specifically about Latino students, how they're completely being affected by this too. There's been an increase of them dropping out of school because they're losing scholarships or funding from this for this very reason. I'm gonna skip environment just for time, and government contracts. It's self-explanatory, but I just wanted to highlight just a summary of all these federal policies, because it is a lot. So here's the report. So this is very similar to the CEP survey. So of course, the theme is there's financial instability, food insecurity, and right, the health coverage. We're seeing that in the communities that our grantee partners are facing. They are relying a lot more on nonprofit services and even emergency services, right? Like, and that's putting a lot of stress on our grantee partners because again, there's limited support, limited funding, and limited staff. And then, and of course, because at the same time that the community is asking for more support, now the grantee partners have to shift the programs, they have to expand it, they have to figure out how to ensure that they don't lose their programming due to federal policy changes. And it's just a lot of burden. I hear the stress even from the survey. I like feel it. It was a lot. So, and then what I noticed too, that a lot of our grantee partners mentioned a lot more impact from ICE enforcement, and it was frequently cited. And mind you, the grantee partners who mostly did the survey are those from the education program. So that really shows that all these policies are affecting every single organization beyond like the program areas, right? So that was really interesting to know that like a lot of those in the education portfolio are being affected by the immigration ICE enforcement. And then there's definitely a lot of intersection, what I've been hearing with low income communities, BIPOC communities, and immigrants and refugees. So just be mindful and give grace to our grantee partners when they're not submitting things on time or they're distracted, because this is what's happening on their end. Any questions with the federal policies? Okay. So one thing I wanted to highlight too is like I asked the grantee partners, like, what was the support that we have provided for you that made the biggest difference, and what are other things that we can really give, or that we missed? So I'm just gonna read some quotes, right? They said that they really appreciate the flexible reporting requirements. Like the online system is clear and easy to navigate. They really liked our urgent response grants. I think that's the feedback that they want. So I think, Scott, that's your answer. They said they want more. They're upset, not upset, but sad that they only got one or for this year urgent response grants. And then of course they're really appreciative of the capacity building grant, right, that they received. And the fact that we allow them to talk about all the challenges. So kudos to you, program officers, that you allow them to share about the challenges that they're facing in this current administrative, cycle. And check-ins, they said that they actually want more check-ins because there's a lot of board and team changes. So I guess they want more of that. And then they said that like us coming into like any events or programmatic like events or anything like that, they appreciate that. And I like this, what they said, having you there validates our mission to the community and shows our students that their support are truly invested in them. And then it says here that site visits and guidance in the application process, we have an incredible support system. So kudos to you guys for allowing them to go through this process. And in terms of capacity building, right? They've asked, they want the same type of capacity building, very similar, fundraising, organizational development, and capacity building. They want collaboration, partnership, and leadership development. Those are the top four. But for this year, what I've noticed, it's the same thing, but they had a really stronger interest in fundraising and training. And the reason why is because they're losing funding a lot. So then they have to reshift how to get more money. So that's what they really want, their priority this year. And they also had a stronger interest in partnership and collaboration. And this is because of last year's events. And they really enjoyed those events that they're like, we want this again. So let's continue on with those parties. That's what they want. Okay, so these are other workshops that they asked for. What I heard is technology, data, and AI. A lot of themes of AI, that's what they talked about. So I thought of you, Julian, about AI. Like, because AI is brand new, and in terms of security, they don't know what to do. I mean, for us, at least we have the IT team to ensure whatever AI thing we're using is safe, but they also would love to have that. They also are they want some sessions about stability and resilience, because it's one thing to teach them to like, because they're trying to survive. So how can they survive during this climate change? And again, they're still asking for leadership and talent development. So any type of that support they would love. An interesting new thing from this year that I didn't see last year is trauma-informed and healing centered courses or sessions for leaders and staff because of the mental health and mental burnout that they're facing this year. And the last year's survey, they did not put mental health burnout as one of the top concerns, because they were just trying to prioritize the work, because they're like, but now the number one thing that they're saying is like they're completely stressed out and burnt out because of all the changes that they're facing. Another one is really just board support. They want to grow their board. They want to diversify their board, and that's a very common thing that they're asking for. And another thing they are asking for is some type of like community organizing advocacy trainings. I know we're not very leaning on that, but that's a common thing that they ask for, and how to like get other teams. And of course, like operational stuff. They want to ensure that their infrastructure is great in terms of record keeping, data development, and like how to do grant end research. So those are some of the common things that they ask for. And we also asked like, how can we support them, right? And these are the common things that they asked for. They said, please introduce us to funders, and please invite us to funding networks. So maybe this could be a way that we could create an event where we invite a whole bunch of funders, and we invite our grantee partners, and they have like conversations. They said, please help us find board members and refer them to them. So that would be an interesting take that we can do to support our grantee partners. And what was really cool is that they actually want to support other grantee partners. Like, for example, they're like happy to like do some training or skill sharing with other grantee partners, like Field Museum, how they did the fundraising thing. They like grantee partners want to support others. So instead of hiring an outside consultant, it'll be great to hire or like pay one of our grantee partners to lead a workshop. So that's what they asked for. And they really want to connect. They're like, please provide more events. It was really fun. And another thing is also share any community spaces that they can use for their own events, right? Because sometimes it can be a little expensive to rent a space for community. So they're like, please share us any place that we could do it, and also like invite us to other events. And they really want us to continue to amplify their organization. And we've been doing that, but that's very common that they're saying that it's been helpful, especially if we share their work online, then other funders can see it too. And yeah, just that's pretty much what I've seen in the survey. Like what I've seen with them overall, like what I've noticed the difference is, as I mentioned before, is that yes, there's a high demand of their work, and also like they're constantly changing and they're trying to support the community. But what my biggest concern here was their mental health. They're very, very drained. They're very exhausted. Leaders feel so guilty that they can't support their staff members because they're just so stretched out thin. And that's kind of where I want to come off. Like, I don't know how we can support our grantee partners in terms of like that part. So that's what I've heard from them, and not so much negative or like constructive feedback. I think I would consider these things constructive feedback, what they want from us more. And that'll be really great if we could support them in any way. So that is the end of, I think that's the end of my survey. Yes. So any questions, comments, concerns?
Great job.
Very insightful, excellent, as you are.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, very much.
Thank
This
you,
is
Alex.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
doing all this work and for putting it together so beautifully.
Yeah,
Can
thank
you
you.
share this presentation